All right, we're live. Hi, everyone. Today with Michael Phillips, and I think this is his. He just told me it's his first interview in English, so Yahoo. And I think, pardon me, yeah.
Oh no, I was just going to say it's the first official interview in English about the book because the book's in Italian. So but thanks to you.
No, thank you. And perhaps because your book is about your life, but also the context that you grew up in, I think it would be appropriate to ask you as your first question, what were the troubles, or what are the troubles, or what do you see them as?
Well, the troubles relate to a troubled period. So specifically from the late 60s, 1960s, right up until, I suppose, even you could even say the present moment, because it's not quiet. We've all seen recently what's been happening on the falls in the Shankill Road, which it brings back memories of the bad old days, which really means that it could easily flare up again if it's not brought under control. So that's what the troubles really referred to, is that a period in the Northern Irish history. Of course, the bigger picture relates to the British occupation in the north, and that's where the troubles came about also.
Perhaps I could ask you, why did it play such an important role in your life? I mean, you grew up during that period, and almost half of your book talks about your different friends, the people you met. Could you just tell us or explain why that was so important for you? How, what kind of memories remain, or how, sometimes when I smell mozzarella, I think of my grandmother. I'm not sure if you have similar experiences, stuff like that.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from. Well, of course, I didn't have a choice. I grew up in West Belfast, partly in West Belfast, and also because of where my home is directly located in the countryside. I also grew up in the countryside. A lot of my family are farmers, so I had kind of both environments. I grew up in both environments. What did it mean? It really meant we grew up, not just my family. Obviously, we had our whole area, the part of Belfast. Grew up in abnormal times. Everything, there was utterly nothing normal about where we grew up or about how we grew up. Just simple acts of going into town or doing the weekly shopping, going to school. We had to pass by daily checkpoints. Now, and the period I'm talking about now is right up until from the late 60s, right up until 90s. This period where we had daily checkpoints, the army, armed soldiers and police officers in the street would be stopping you going to school, stopping you going into the shops, everywhere, anywhere. So that was how we grew up. We had this backdrop of violence as well, committed by obviously both sides, Catholic side, Protestant side, nationalist, unionist. So it was crazy. It was crazy to see. It was crazy to go through, and obviously the consequences of that period and of the wanton violence all the time was that a lot of people died. A lot of people were injured and arrested, in prison.
Almost every character you present in your book dies after a while.
Well, I suppose it does seem like that, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't funny at all. The period was not fun. I don't mean for you laughing, but I'm talking about the general. There was a lot of it was just crazy. It was people literally not dropping dead, but as I say, being shot dead or being just in prison, just, you know, almost on a regular basis. So right up until the early 90s, when it started to really calm down, when the first peace process was brought in, and then it failed, and then the second peace process happened. You know, it was just a constant. And even actually up until quite recently, I know of people who are still being hassled and still being the state, that the British forces see them as some type of threat, or, you know, and all it is really is that they're annoying them still after over 20 years of our when the initial peace process kicked in. You know, it's they don't want the part of the British government and the unionists. You know, they do not want lasting peace. They want things to go back, because in that way then they can have their power back, and their wealth back. You know, because they don't want to share it. They don't want to live in peace with the other side.
If I'm not mistaken, also most of the MPs from Northern Ireland are unionists. I'm not sure if I'm mistaken.
Well, I mean, I don't know specifically what the numbers would be. I wouldn't. It's pretty much split down the middle in.
Oh, okay.
For numbers, I think again, I don't follow the numbers specific enough for being away for so long. But yeah, they do still have the majority of the power, you know, and they're just clinging on to it for fear of death. They just don't want to let it go. Having said that, the nationalists, in a broad sense, are making inroads, and there's a lot more equality and a lot more distribution of the power among nationalist groups now, so which thankfully it's starting to filter down into the communities, particularly the lower class, working class communities in Belfast, even in the loyalist or Republican areas, are starting to benefit from that. Otherwise, before they didn't. You know, it was the unionist areas and unionist quarters that always done well of it, because they kept everything within their own parties.
I've got a quick question, because an underlying theme of the whole book is you seem to take great pains to say how the unionists lived in the same conditions that you did, and you mention it quite a few times that they weren't that different from you.
No,
the loyalists.
Yeah. No,
but you say in like 4 or 5 places, and you seem to mention it a lot. Could you talk about like the relations, or how it was talking to these different factions? Or
yeah, it's very true. Even in other cities like Derry, you know, you take the working class areas where there was a Republican or loyalist factions. Now, what I mean by that, if we start off at the top, so you had the Unionist family and the Nationalist family, then split them down. The Unionist family, their armed faction, or the faction that they would get to do their dirty work, would be the Loyalists. And of course, the Loyalists were from working class communities that were as badly off as in the Republican areas, you know. So they
can I interrupt you just for a second? So maybe you can explain all of the different ramifications, or not ramifications, the branching out of all the factions. Because I from the book, I can remember at least 6, and it's so difficult for people who are not in that context or haven't lived through it.
If I was going into depth, into detail, then it would probably even confuse me even more. So I would just try to say, like, so you had the Unionist family, right, and the Nationalist family. Now, coming down, as I said before, you had then the extremist factions of the Unionist family were the Loyalists, right? Going over to the Nationalist area, then you had the Republicans under that, again, more extremist in the Catholic working class areas, and the nationalists so unionists want to maintain the union, the British Union, so the Northern Ireland status, whereas the nationalists tended to, of course, they were more neutral, in the sense that going back to the SDLP would have been the main nationalist party back years ago. They were collaborated alongside unions to they were more neutral, and they didn't believe that violence against the British state was correct. So then, of course, you had the Republican family under them, that of course wanted a united Ireland in whatever way possible. And so that's the kind of differences. The Republicans and Loyalists were lived in very similar circumstances, poor working ground, working class backgrounds. They certainly lacked a lot of the resources that, because the unions controlled the economy, controlled the jobs, and yet, ironically enough, the unionists, the Loyalists, weren't able to penetrate even into the unionist family, because, of course, it's a very elitist family, and they kept them down, and that's why I make these comparisons about the Loyalist and Republican backgrounds. We often suffered the same fate, having a lack of resources, lack of our local economies were terrible. The streets were often underprivileged, So that's why I make those comparisons.
One thing that really shocked me was the amount of violence. I mean, the whole book is, I'm not sure if I could say laced with violence in every moment. And I'm just thinking of my childhood. I mean, I grew up in such a different way. I was just thinking because it almost seems like there was an apartheid, like there was such a distinction. I was just wondering if you could talk a bit about the advantages, or what was so different. Like, what did the unionists have? What kind of advantages did their power bring them?
Okay, well, yeah, it was very much of an apartheid system, and still it is very much like that. Not as bad, obviously, but it still clearly exists.
Could you give me some examples of how you still feel this?
Of course, the jobs. Easy jobs, you couldn't. Catholics just couldn't get good jobs. It was simple as that. You didn't even have to. You didn't even have to say you were Catholic. Once people knew your name, if you went for an interview, if you applied for a job, and they saw you were from a certain area, from part of like parts of West Belfast or parts of North Belfast, they say, Catholic. Fenian, which is a derogatory term for Catholics, to say that we're all Fenians, everybody was for a united Ireland, which wasn't even correct among the Catholics. So that's, and even in my early childhood, I was always interested in aeronautics. And I actually recount in some of the part of the book, that when I wanted to apply for engineering in Shorts was still is a company in the city centre of Belfast, and they, at that time, again going back over 30 years, they were just it was Protestant run, Protestant owned, and it was nearly impossible to get it. Now, I remember before I left home, when I was still an early teenager, 17, 18, a couple of my people I played football with actually got the jobs in it, but it was still very quite dangerous to accept a job, because even if you got the job, you were always discriminated against for promotion. And of course, we've all heard the stories about people being bullied, and even being beaten up or anything, just all sorts of things like that. So that's what I mean by the apartheid system, is that there just was no equality back then.
I wasn't going to ask this question, but how do you see a reunified Ireland, or what are your thoughts on this eventual future?
Well, I see it mainly from a pragmatic point of view. Up until, I suppose, really up until maybe 10, 15 years ago, even Sinn Féin may not have had a very good political strategy, even in my own personal opinion, for the unification of Ireland. And the reason why I say that is because they couldn't. It was a very extremist point of view to unite Ireland no matter what, in any form possible, including obviously violence. And of course, now that the old guard, I say the old guard. So Martin McGuinness died a couple of years ago, and then Gerry Adams, once he stepped back, you have a new generation of Sinn Féiners who are trying to reach out to nationalists and unionists alike to show them, says, it is actually possible. We can live together. We could live in a united Ireland, and as long as, of course, we share the resources and share responsibilities. Whereas before, I think, the idea of a united Ireland was, screw the other side. We want united Ireland no matter what. And of course, it didn't work out politically expedient. So whereas now, I see it as a possibility, as an opportunity that both sides, that even the Orange Order, in a certain way, could carry on some of their traditions, not the ones marching through Catholics areas, which is completely it's not on. But if they say they have the culture, they say have the history, okay, well, let's see it, but not if it means by stomping on our heads to prove that you're better than Catholics. That's not going to right.
Is it still a sort of dream for you? Like when I talk with my grandmother, my other grandmother who hasn't passed, she always says, do anything you can to help the two Koreas reunite. And I was just wondering if you still have that feeling that just burns inside of you.
God, yeah, of course. I was Republican. Am I still a Republican? Yeah, in a very general sense. I want to see the Republic, a united Ireland. Definitely, my ideas on it has changed and what it could be. Because even in the Republic of Ireland, there's a lot of people that don't want us from the north, and it's always been like that. So I really don't know how I can't foresee, obviously, the future. I can't foresee how even that's going to take place, and I just hope that the next generation of politicians do have some way that they can join both sides. Because remember, there wasn't just the problem in the north with the unionists or loyalists. There's also the problem with the ones in the south who were also against having us being joined with us. So it's actually even more complicated than just us wanting the British out. It's whether the Irish want to be part of us as well. So.
As my last question, I would like to ask you, what are 3 things you would like all of your readers to remember? So like 3 events or perhaps 3 concepts even.
From the book you talk, or in general?
Yeah, but even inspired from the book, something.
Well, the first thing I suppose as you related to in the book, that there was just so much violence, and violence was everywhere. It was at home, it was in the street, it was in a school, it was even on the sports grounds, and no matter what we all go through, no matter what a person might find in a hopeless situation, is that, it's never as bad as that. It can only get really bad if you die, So there is always a little bit of hope that you're going to come out of it better. And I think it's important to try and be positive and try to come out of it as also as sane as possible, and not bitter and not hating the world for it. So I think that's the first thing, Second thing is for the, I see, actually, since I've come to Bologna, I've been here almost 20 years, if it's 16 years, I think. And I can see how the politics in general here in Bologna, Italy, and even in Europe is taking a really bad path. There's with the extremists on all the sides now, on the left, the right, everyone's trying to push their own agenda in a very bad way. And what I mean bad way is, first of all, their speeches, the way they're talking, is all extremist, and it's really, it doesn't take much to go from extreme words and vocabulary that you use, particularly from the leader's point of view, to then starting shooting people. It really doesn't. It takes this, it can happen just like that, And
it's happened in the States and in so many other countries.
Yeah, and in Europe as well. Well, a lot of the Muslim extremists, for example, and anyone, also the right here in Italy, there's plenty of examples in the Italian press. I think that the politicians have to really do a lot more, try a lot harder to calm down a wee bit. It's because you can't calm a situation down, or you can't neutralize the situation by using extremist language. So that would be the second one. And I suppose the third one, what can I say, is don't know.
Even something from your life, an experience that you really cherished. You could even talk about you crashing your plane.
Almost. I nearly crashed it a couple of times, but I didn't. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I think in it, you got to have some type of objectives, real good long-term goals, objectives, and have fun doing it, I even when we were in prison, and we had some terrible times in prison, but we also had some really good fun times, and the reason why is because we had it, each of us had our goals, about what was going to happen in the end, or what we plan to do, maybe when we get out, or how, So I think that's important, that personally, that you try to have as much fun in life as well, no matter what. If the shit hits the fan, just to look on the bright side of things,
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mada. Okay, bye-bye.